doctors and therapists of Reddit, do you have any "no, that's not normal" stories? Our first post is by a deleted user. Not a doctor, but I had an experience like this with someone I slept with. We had just finished and were cuddling when he remarked that he was happy he felt like he was in his body. I looked at him funny and asked him what he meant. He said, "You know that funny feeling you get after sex where you feel like you're not in your body? You're like looking at yourself from the opposite side of the room? Well, right now I don't feel that. I feel happy instead." I tried my best not to look horrified, and I asked him if it was always like that for him. He explained to me that it only started happening after something awful happened 2 years ago. I had to do my best to gently explain to him that no, I do not get that funny feeling, and most people don't. I also had to explain, to the best of my non-professional capacity, what disassociation was. Looking this kind of thing up, it seems not unheard of but very uncommon, and stems from a dissociative disorder linked to childhood trauma, which obviously is very sad, but at least he said he felt happy in this instance. The next post is by Hamsterella. A guy in his 20s came in complaining about belly button problems. I examined him. He had an irritated scab inside of his belly button caused by aggressive lint picking, but the dude was sweaty and had a slight tremor. He looked like crap. When I asked how he was feeling overall, he said, "Oh, okay I guess. Just a bit tired. Drank a bit more this week than usual. I probably overdid it." I had to pry for details, and turns out he drank a gallon of gin over the last 3 days and stopped drinking alcohol when he started vomiting large amounts of blood and pooping a mixture of bright red blood and dark sticky stuff, which was melina, digested blood. Yeah, probably at the point that you're exploding out of both ends, should you consider that maybe you've overdone it. He was totally unaware of the fact that he was going through alcohol withdrawal, sweating, shaking, because he hadn't stopped drinking long enough in recent memory to experience symptoms. I sent him straight to the emergency room where they found a tear in his esophagus that required immediate intervention, and he was admitted for an inpatient alcohol detox. I read his hospital note. He still insisted that the ED doctor examine his belly button. It's so crazy that that's what made him go to the hospital. To think that picking his belly button probably saved his life. The next post is by Thanos. A woman came into the hospital because she was feeling tired and casually mentioned her persistent vaginal bleeding she'd been dealing with for 2 months. She said it wasn't ever a large amount, so she didn't think twice about it. Labs were done and her hemoglobin was 3.9. For context, that's low. Like, you should be dying low. But she looked perfectly fine. I'm glad that she did mention it, but I'm very curious how you casually mention that. A lot of people in the comments say that they're unsure what a normal number is, assuming that 3.9 is so low. So in case anyone's interested, they say that 11 to 13 is considered a normal number. In the comments, Je suis la fille says, if the hemoglobin decreases gradually, the body can actually adapt to continue functioning. When my daughter was about 9 months old, she was around the same 3.9 should be dead mark. The haematologist explained that she'd gradually gotten anemic, so her body was able to adapt to the lower hemoglobin on her body. The symptoms I saw was that her lips would turn purple sometimes, and she slept a lot. So PSA, if you bleed a lot and have either of those, probably see a doctor. The next post is by Sutu and Joe, and they share 3 stories, but the first story, I will say, made me feel quite lightheaded, so just a warning, it's gross. A 50-year-old man came in for a chronic issue follow-up, and he brought his wife with him this time around. At the end of the visit, she says, "Hey, tell the doc about that thing you can do." He turns to me proudly and tells me that he can whistle from his penis. If he really pushed, he could blow gas from it. His wife insisted it wasn't normal, but he was certain most guys could. Turns out, he had a connection between his bowel and his bladder. Fuck, that's disgusting. A mum brings her kid in because the babysitter was concerned about these spells the child would have. Apparently, the child would have episodes where he would just blankly stare at them and not acknowledge whatever it is they were telling him or whatever he was doing. The parents just thought he was being ignorant and not listening to them, or being absent-minded. The kid turned out to be having absence seizures. And the third story, a younger girl who came in for generalised abdominal pain that she experienced on and off for years. She always just wrote it off as either menstrual cramps, bad food, or just life. We asked her if her bowel movements were regular, and she said yes. However, at some point, someone was sharp enough to ask her how often she has bowel movements, to which she said about once every 2 to 3 weeks. She'd been suffering from pretty severe constipation, but she thought it was normal to have bowel movements once to twice a month. I don't understand how that's possible. Surely she eats more often than that, so where does everything go? The next post is by Brie Butterscotch. Not a doctor, but when I was maybe 14 or 13, I remember describing to my primary how during my periods I would either pass out from the pain, be unable to move, or get sick. And I told her a story about how I went on a trip to Italy, and sometime in the middle of the flight I became wildly sick to the point of terrifying the poor flight attendants. I filled 4 puke bags, crawled to the back of the plane clutching my stomach, then when the door was locked, attempted to use the first class bathrooms, just so I could finish being sick. Then, when I was denied entry, just laid down in the aisle waiting for sweet, sweet death to take me. When we were exiting the plane, I just passed out. But periods are supposed to be painful, right? The doctor was like, "Honey, you're supposed to experience some discomfort, not be incapacitated." Anyway, she put me on birth control and I've never been happier. I've tried to find if she explains what was wrong anywhere, but she just says that her uterus is cursed, and when she has periods, it hurts way more than it should. The only way she was able to stop it is using birth control to just stop the periods. There is another period story here, probably worth sharing even if just for the sake of awareness, by photo editing account. I woke up one day with a period so heavy, the bed was soaked. I stood up and it just poured out of me, clots the size of my palm. Overwhelmed, I did what any woman would do, if they could, and phoned my mum to come over and comfort me and help me clean up the mess. At this point, I'm still thinking, this is a strangely heavy period. And I was more worried how my landlord would react to the carpet. I then fainted, woke up, and fainted again. I phoned my mum again to cry about how my stupid period was making me miss work. While my parents were on their way, they called an ambulance that arrived at the house first and rushed me to hospital. Turns out it wasn't a period. Massive internal hemorrhage in the womb. That sounds horrifying. Thank God you went to the hospital. The next post is by Sleepy Hollow. I was the patient. When I was growing up, I had constant stomach aches. Every time I ate, I'd get sick. I went to the doctor multiple times for it, but they could never figure out what was wrong. Eventually, I started to think that everyone lives with pain like that, and I was just being a wimp and couldn't deal with it. I barely ate, such that I was super underweight. I was miserable all the time. I was constantly stressed and depressed because of this problem. Fast forward to grad school. My first year is in China. I'm there for a few months, and then over time, my symptoms disappear. I don't have stomach aches anymore. I gained about 40 pounds, seemingly overnight. Now I'm at a healthy doctor-approved weight. And my depressive symptoms disappear almost entirely. But how could that happen? What could have caused such a change? Turns out, I'm lactose intolerant. I grew up in the Midwest where pretty much everything has dairy in it. And I'd been eating constantly for so long, it took months for my system to reset. Being in China, where dairy isn't so common, made all the difference. I felt like such an idiot when I realised that was what was making me ill. But on the plus side, I feel better, I look better, and I'm a much happier person now. That's so sad, that must have been such a miserable existence. Eating is one of the few great joys in this world. And to feel that bad constantly? Really glad that the fix was so simple. The final post today is by a deleted user. When I was in medical school, I had a mother come in because her son was having behavioural issues at school. Didn't take long to find out he had encopresis, basically meaning he pooped himself without knowing it, which at any age would be hard, but especially in school. A little backstory, he played Xbox every waking moment with no bathroom breaks. Eventually this stretched things out so stuff could squeeze out, and he lost sensation down there. They share another pretty gross experience in the comments. We had a surgery resident develop hydronephrosis, sorry if that's pronounced wrong. This is where the tubes dilate leading up to the bladder, and this was from holding her urine back so much. You can dilate any part all the way back to the kidney. Thank you very much for listening. I dearly hope that anyone listening doesn't have any of these symptoms, but if you do, get it checked out. If you have any thoughts on something I've discussed, please leave a comment, otherwise you'd be doing me a great service if you like or subscribe, and see you next time.